about 5 medium onions. If they're a little small like this one, then just do 6 or 7. But a nice amount of onions. Brisket and onions are also best friends. I know I said that about brisket and thyme, but onions also have sugar and proteins, which add to the whole caramelizing process and flavoring the sauce and the foundation. So about 5 to 6 medium onions in a hot pan. I'm gonna put some oil. Onions into the hot pan. Again, do this in batches. You don't want to overcrowd your pan. You want to get that nice caramelization. So if we have to do it in batches, if you don't have a huge pan, go for it. Layers of flavor, salt and pepper. A little kosher salt, a little fresh cracked black pepper. And we're just going to let them caramelize. So our onions are almost ready. What we want to do is spray the insert, the slow cooker insert, so nothing sticks, especially we've got a sweet sticky marinade. Just spray it well, especially because we have a sweet sticky marinade. Okay, love the sizzle and the smell of fried onions. And this is going into the bottom of our slow cooker. Of course, we spoke about adding onions because of the flavor that they bring to the sauce. But this particular sauce, I'm not going to strain. Unlike the classic brisket in lesson 2, I think they add such a nice flavor and texture and mouthfeel to the finished product. So that's why I slice them a little bit larger so they'll withstand the cooking time. And you're gonna see, they're gonna make the sauce actually creamy. Very important. Number 1, we're going to reserve the marinade because that is what we're going to then pour over top, and that's going to be our braising liquid for this particular brisket. But even with marinade, you must pat dry your meat. Remember, water and moisture, they steam, they won't brown. So we'll totally be doing this step, the browning before we braise that golden rule, for nothing if we don't pat the meat dry thoroughly. So we want to pat it dry even after it's been marinated, and always before you salt and pepper your meat anyway, or season it or spice rub it.
3, 2, 1.
I'm going to flip it on a paper towel because there's lots of marinade after we just patted that side dry. It's still at the bottom of this pan here, so we don't want to defeat the purpose of what we've just done. While I'm patting this dry, I'm going to put the hot pan back on the stovetop. This is what we used for our onions. Add a little bit more olive oil to coat the bottom of the pan. Pat our meat dry thoroughly of any moisture, marinade. A super important tip, before you salt and pepper, before you season and rub, and even after a marinade, all before you brown. So salt, you know how it goes. And a little bit of pepper. This is going to bring out the flavor, get us that really nice crust. Going to flip it and do the same thing. Remove this paper towel here. Our meat is basically nice and dry. Again, a little bit of salt. And some fresh cracked black pepper. One of the number 1 questions I get is I don't have a Dutch oven. I don't have a pan big enough or a baking dish big enough to hold a 6-pound, a 7-pound, an 8-pound brisket if I'm making something really big for my whole family for Rosh Hashanah or Shabbat or any kind of holiday meal or family gathering. What do I do? So we're going to do a little learning test here. Our slow cooker is small, our pan is small. Just cut the meat. But it's the same amount of poundage. So just because you're cutting the meat and you have 2 4-pound pieces, you still cook it as if it's a 4-pound brisket according to the recipe instructions. So really important tip there. Just cut the meat to fit the pan. You do not want to overcrowd that pan. Okay, guys? So just cut 2 hunks of meat. We want to get a nice sear on the meat, and it won't work if you overcrowd the pan. And of course, if you can't fit it in your slow cooker, that also. So practically speaking, you cut the meat into 2 pieces. It will fit and braise nicely. And by the way, just so this shows you that this is a great second cut. It has the fat running through the middle, whereas that first cut doesn't. It's just more the flat part at the top here. So you can kind of see this is a really great example of a second cut. Place it in and down and away from you. We're going to let that sear 5 to 7 minutes on each side. Now, a marinade with sugar in it actually burns and chars quickly. So after about 3-4 minutes, let's start to check this meat just in case, because we want that beautiful brown crust, but we don't want a burnt crust. I like to just press it down to make sure we're getting a nice even sear. The heat should be medium high. If it's burning too quickly, you can lower the heat a little bit, but you want to hear that sound. If you don't hear that sound, you're not actually browning, you're just kind of like having the meat swim in a pool of oil, and instead of creating that beautiful exterior crust, all the oil will be absorbed into the meat. Not what we're going for. And take a quick peek. Remember I said just lift up an edge. Looking good. It's releasing beautifully. And you can actually see that being 24 hours in the fridge, the inside of the meat is nice and red and beautiful, but the fridge also just started to affect the exterior of the meat and the color a little bit, all helping to texturize, tenderize, and get us that wonderful crust. How beautiful is that? And like I said, some people even stand up the brisket on its side and hold it and brown all sides. Both sides is fine for me. You don't have to get the edges. If you want to, be my guest and then invite me over as your guest because I want to eat that brisket.